Tonight we see a different discipline, scale control line. We've had free flight, we've had RC, we've had generic ones. So now it's a turn of control line with Danny Fenton, who is the current F4B British champion. So over to Danny.
Thank you, Graham. Let me see if they can get the share screen thing working.
Yeah.
Like you say, you got to press things twice. So thanks, Graham, for that introduction. I think after the poster that I saw for the event, I might need a wider screen on the old laptop to get all of my head in. But it was quite glowing. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to sort of shine the bright light of control line in everybody's eyes, or dazzle you, or make you dizzy, whatever.
Danny, just before we go any further, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If anybody has any questions, could you just type them into the chat window, please? And then we'll sort the questions out at the end. Sorry, Danny, back to you.
That's all right, not a problem. Okay, for those of the that don't know me, that's me. I've been doing F4B for a few years. My first event was in 2017, and then I did 2018, and finally won gold in 2019. But I've also done flying only control line and scale indoor RC. I was champion in 2017, and I did have a go at free flight, but I'm not terribly good at it, so I moved away from that one. I'd just like to thank some of the people that have contributed pictures towards this. It's Chris Bott, Mike Chapman, and Fred Cronenwet who have in Fred's case, unwittingly known that he's supplied pictures, but hopefully the others are okay with it. So I'd like to thank him for that. So let's get started, shall we? I was talking to some people early on, and they haven't got a clue what control line is at all. So forgive me, those that have done control line, in the distant past and know all about it, and I'm teaching you to suck eggs for this first bit, but I want to just try and get everybody at the same point at least. Control line effectively means that you're flying a model aircraft around yourself using two lines to control the primary control being elevator in this case, and you basically step slowly in a circle while the model flies around you. And if you lock your wrist and point your arm at the model with the handle vertical, you'll find that as you point your arm up, the elevator will go up and your pitch will increase. Point your arm down and it goes down. So that's the fundamental idea. Okay. So a little bit of history. It seems Jim Walker seems to be accredited with the first patent for two-line control line in the States back in the 40s, and the appearance of glow engines in the 50s caused a real upsurge in control line in the States, which is where I initially did my control line stuff, was in America. As far as the UK goes, I'm led to believe Ron Moulton went out to the States and saw some of this control line malarkey, and came back to the UK and was a big advocate of it. And one of the things he produced was this control line manual, which, although I haven't got a copy of it, Andy has, and he says it's a real Bible to control line flying. So I'll have to get my eyes on a copy of that and have a look. But to me, one whiff of ether in diesel fuel takes me back to a hangar behind one of the hangars at Sherburne in Elmet. My dad ran a business there, and we used to fly control line in the shadow of the hangar so that we didn't have any wind. And me and my stepbrother would just try and get this flaming diesel to start, eventually get it to start. One of us would grab the handle, then we'd lob it, and then we'd crash it. And we just repeated this all through the summer holiday until eventually we could actually go round and round a few times. All good fun, but I think that's probably echoes how everybody else did it as well. Find some long grass, start it, throw it, and repeat. So all good fun. So a little bit more on, you know, what we use to fly a control line. This is fairly obvious. It's the handle. It's the bit we hold, and it's. Some people are very precious about it, and they have to have it sculpted to their hand and never use a different handle, and it's always the same one. But this one is an E-flite one. I got no affiliation with E-flite or anything like that, but it was just a nice picture. But it does show quite clearly what you really need is some way of adjusting the line lengths so that you can get the elevator to sit at its midpoint when you're pointing at the model with your wrist at a comfortable angle. So you can adjust those two thumb screws to alter the length of the up and the down line. I would strongly advise removing those clips. They look pretty useless. If you put one of Ronnie Tribe's monsters on the end of the line, I think they would let go. The lines themselves, we tend to use either PAW Stay Straight or the Sullivan stuff. I tend to use the Sullivan non-insulated. And those numbers there just give you a bit of an idea of the strengths of the line. I use the 7-strand stainless. The PAW Stay Straight is kind of like a modern version of what we all knew as the Keelcraft Lay Straight, which is a silvered piano wire or a tinned piano wire. They're very delicate, the lines, and as control liners get quite animated when anybody goes near the lines. If you get shouted, mind your feet or something like that, it's because you're about to step on one of the lines. And if you get a kink in one of the lines, that's, you know, you've almost got to scrap it. There was an interesting incident at the Nats at Barkston a few years ago, to which Andy came rushing over to our rescue when a cyclist decided he was going to cycle right down the middle of the runway. I don't know how he got past the ropes or everything else, but he cycled right down the middle and then proceeded to cycle over our lines. So Andy chased him off and put a flea in his ear, which was much appreciated. The next bit we look at, we come in, you know, looking at all the bits we need, is probably one of the most important parts to control, and that's the lead out guide that you have in the wingtip. So the lines come from the handle through this lead out guide to the model. Now, nearly all of us nowadays will have adjustable lead out guides, and this allows us to slide the lead out backwards and forwards on the wingtip. This is a Dennis Bryant chipmunk that I've competed with. The job of the lead out is to alter the tension or the pull on the line tension. So the further back you slide that, the more line tension you're going to get. So the next item I come to is the bell crank. Sorry if you've seen all this before, I'm just trying to get everybody at the same point. The bell crank transfers those pulls on the lines to a push pull onto a push rod back to the elevator. This is a floating bell crank, and this is a Brodac one made of, I don't know what it's made of. It's like a glass reinforced plastic, I suppose. Bell cranks are quite difficult to get in this country because there's nobody selling the Brodac equipment. So it's a bit awkward. This is a floating bell crank where you actually use a carbon rod and you float the bell crank on the carbon rod with ply plates above and below to stop it moving. So you don't tend to use a nut and bolt anymore, but you know, whatever floats your boat, all works. You can make them out of fiberglass, aluminium, all sorts of things. There's no hard and fast rule. Then carrying on the flow of it, we push rod to the elevator, same as RC. We tend to use something like a 6mm carbon arrow shaft or carbon tube, and then you can buy proper aluminium fittings that go in the end of the tube, which are really, you know, really posh, and for those that got bags of money. But I just tend to use, say, 30mm of 3mm threaded rod, rough up the inside of the carbon tube, and sink a good chunk of it into the tube. I use JB Weld for this. I've never had one let go yet. It seems to work well, and then just a 3mm clevis on the end of that to your elevator. Pretty standard. This is probably the most daft picture on the whole presentation, I'm afraid, but I kind of included it anyway. So the pull from the push rod goes to what we call an elevator joiner. So if you've got two elevator halves, this joins the two halves together, and it also gives you a pivot and an arm at which to transfer that push pull into a torsion on the elevator surface itself. Right, this is where it gets fun. It all makes sense anyway, I would have thought. So we have a handle that we grip hold of. The up line is at the top, down line at the bottom, obviously. And the up line goes to the bell crank. Well, they both go to the bell crank. It pivots, push rod, elevator. So as you point your arm and lock your wrist at the model, if you raise your arm, the up line is pulled, it pulls the bell crank, pushes the push rod, and away you go. With control line scale, certainly with control line scale, you're only allowed to, or you have to operate the elevator with a mechanical device such as this. You can't use radio for a primary control function. So this remains. So why do control line or control line? There's a lot of things about control line that are really nice. You get an immediate response to whatever you do on the handle. You are in direct connection with the model, and it's the only one where you really are. So with RC, you're responding to what you see, and there is a delay. You can't respond that fast. But with control line, you feel it almost as it happens, and you can respond almost instantly. Well, young people can, I can't, but there you go. So it's a very direct connection to the model. It's really nice. It's a really nice feeling when you're flying like that. They're very simple. You just need the lines, a motor, and a model, and quite low cost. And they don't need a lot of flying space, really, because they never go very far. So one of the nice things is we're soon to get a tarmac circle at Buckminster, which I'm really looking forward to. It's running a little bit late, but it's still happening as far as I know. So that'll allow us to have a few more scale comps off of tarmac. The control line models, or certainly the ones I build, don't tend to like flying from grass. They're not as big as the RC models, so the wheels don't tend to be as big. So a tarmac circle is a real leap forward. So now we can fly more than just at the Nationals, which would be good. There's also rumours, and again, Graham might want to comment later, of a possible return of an F4B type competition at the possible World Champs in a few years' time, which would be really nice to see. It's still very popular over in Europe, and there's still a small gaggle of us in the UK that are enjoying scale control line. So what do we do to make a model fly well on control line? Because you can take an ARTF or any RC model and convert it for control line. The one I've done is a Dennis Bryant Chipmunk, and there's nothing special about that. So what I'm going to talk about over the next few slides is the center of gravity, the lead out angle, the bell crank position, and these are all affected along the longitudinal, lateral, and vertical axis. Okay, so where the C of G exactly is very important. So if we start with the longitudinal C of G along the fuselage, that's where what we commonly look at as the C of G. That's where you put your fingers under the wing and balance the model. And as I've extended that line out perpendicular to give the C of G in a line towards the wingtip. The wingtip I'm particularly interested in this case is the port wingtip, because typically we fly anti-clockwise, so that's the wingtip that's pointing towards the handle. So what we look at now, I can't see all of that slide. I don't know whether you can. The right hand side is missing because of all the people. Hopefully you can still see it. Yeah, okay. I'm assuming you can. Andy, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the bell crank? Yeah, okay, brilliant. Okay. So what we've got is we normally position the forward lead out of the bell crank on the C of G or a bit further forward, somewhere in there, and then that C of G line usually sits somewhere between the pivot and the forward bell crank hole, somewhere in there. But it doesn't actually matter one jot where you put the bell crank. You could put the bell crank in the cowl or on the tailplane if you really felt inclined. But what would happen is the lines would go through the lead out, and then they would bend back to the tailplane or bend forward to the cowl, and the resistance on the line would be incredible, and it just wouldn't really work. You need really freely flowing and sliding lines for this to all to work, especially when the model is upwind and the lines are really light. It has to be a really smooth elevator on this. If the elevator doesn't drop under its own weight, you're probably going to have fun. So what we do, the ideal angle is somewhere between 3 and 1.5 degrees of rake, or lead out drag, or whatever you want to call it. But what absolutely happens when you fly the model, and you might see it in some of the, in a short video right at the end, you'll see that the lines actually curve. They don't go from the handle to the model. You've got the forward momentum of the model and drag, and it causes a bow in the lines, which actually swings the model back towards coming in again at you. So that 1.5 degrees actually ends up at about nothing by the time you've got the drag and the bow of the lines. If you make the model go faster, then the bow isn't so great, and the lead, you know, the turnout angle of the model is higher, and your line tension is greater. So this degree of rake is critical, and you can see why we have the adjustable lead out to allow you to tinker with that depending on what the weather conditions are like. Okay, usually the guys put 2 lead outs in and they run the 2 wires to 2 separate lead outs. I don't do that because I use radio to control my controls, so the wires can touch. It doesn't matter. Some of the other guys are putting signals down the wires on insulated wire, but you really don't want them rubbing against themselves. They'll chafe, they'll go through, and then your signals will be shorted out, and you won't have a good day. Okay. What you've also got to think about is we haven't just got a C of G in the longitudinal direction, in the fore and aft, but we've got a C of G in the vertical plane. Now on the Chipmunk here, I've assumed, just for this, and it does seem to be around, it's certainly right for my model, but it might not be for the full size, but the C of G is probably somewhere around the thrust line or the center of the spinner. But with the cylinder below the spinner, there's a good chance that actually the center of gravity is lower than the spinner and the thrust line. But what you're looking at here is the blue line off to the right is going to the handle. So what will happen is the model will hang or pull through the lead out to the center of gravity. So what you're trying to achieve is that the wings are level. So if the center of gravity was really low and the lead outs are the way they are now, you would find that the outboard wingtip would lift and the model would come in towards you. So you have to know where that C of G is. Okay. So there's an interesting picture here that shows what you can do to see what's going on. If you look at the picture on the right, you can see that the guy is holding the lead outs, and normally the lead outs would be near the wingtip, but it makes no odds really. He's hanging it by the lead outs, and you can see that the nose of the model is hanging slightly down. That's that rake angle that I was on about. That'll mean that the model will pull out and you'll get good line tension. The picture on the left shows you the vertical C of G that I was talking about earlier. He's hanging the model, and you can see that the outboard wingtip, which is the one towards the ground, lowest in the photograph, is actually angling the whole model out of the circle. And that gives you a bit more line tension as well. I don't like that personally because, and maybe Brian will, as a flying judge, will comment later as to what angle he likes to see the model at. But I think the judges want to see it level, so I try and get that absolutely level. You've also got a lead out. You've also got a lead weight in the wingtip, on the outboard wingtip, which is usually set to be about the same weight as the lines, so that you're balancing everything and you're trying to keep everything in even. Let's see. Right, so that's that bit of it. It's all very well having a handle and you can make the model go up and down. You want to do a bit more, you know, for scale, you want to do a bit more. And the next thing to come along really was a throttle. You need a throttle. So Jim Walker produced this 3-line type system, and you can see the finger hole at the top of the handle. And there's a 3rd line running down the middle. And what you do is you pull that ring towards you, and it increases the throttle. So you have a mechanical linkage to the throttle of the aircraft. The strap at the bottom, by the way, everybody has to slip that around their wrist when they're flying, just in case there's a line breakage or anything like that. So this is a 3rd line throttle control. And what you see in the model is a bit of a nightmare. I never flew like this, but again, Brian and Matt might be able to comment on it. But basically, your bell crank is still the same as it always was. So you've got the bell crank running through here. This is the normal one. You've got the two lead out lines here and here. But then you've got a third line, which is this one. And it's coming to this funny shaped bell crank here with a pivot point, I think, around here. No, the pivot point's still there. This is the takeoff point for the throttle, which is going through a reversal bell crank. So the throttle is off to this end, obviously where the fuel tank is. So when you pull the third line, the middle line, it operates the throttle. When you let go of it, it just spring loads back to idle. The issue is when you pull the throttle, if it's not a really light system, you actually take line tension away from your main two lines. So you've got to be quite careful how you set this up. And obviously with the wind changing during your flights, this all changes, and you're going upwind, downwind, crosswind every lap. So it's all getting quite fun. So that was all very well, but it would be nice if we had a bit more control. So there's a guy in Europe that created one of these, and his name's completely gone. But this is a Clancy Arnold unit from the States. And what it really is a servo tester, basically. So this is Mike Chapman's, one of Mike Chapman's handles. And on top of the handle, you can see he's got like a servo tester type box with a slider on it for his throttle and an on-off switch on the left. And what you do is you just put the servo signals down the two control line wires, insulated wires, and you're able to then decouple that signal at the other end with a sort of like a receiver, but it's not got any RF. And that can then be used to drive a servo. So in this case, he's able to operate the throttle down insulated flying lines. That was all well and good, but we want a bit more. You know, we want flaps and retracts and all the other goodies, you know, that everybody's got. So this is Bernard Seal's controller that he showed me. And I think it is another Clancy Arnold unit, it's probably a 4-channel unit or something like that. Bernard likes to squeeze the handle together. So you can see there's two pieces of wood. But when you crush them together, it pushes on that potentiometer and that arm at the top. And that's how he increases his throttle. So when his fingers are tight together and his knuckles are completely white and straining, he's going flat out. And then he's got a couple of switches and buttons on there that I don't know what they do, but they, you know, for whatever channels you want to operate. So this is an early one. This is a Neutronics, which is the Clancy Arnold system. And you can see this is a 4-channel encoder in the top on the left and the decoder, the bit that goes in the model, on the right. It's quite a few years old, but I think a lot of modelers are still using this system. And it works fine. So, however, oh, yeah, sorry. This is Mike Chapman's P-51 Mustang, and he's won a few times with this. What the interesting thing here is, you can see 2 wires coming out of the wing, and then you can see the 2 lead out lines that are going to go to the handle. These are insulated. So what happens on his lines, there's 2 wires soldered to the end of it to take the signal off of the lines, and he plugs them into these wires, and that's how that signal gets into the model, and then it's connected to the electronics internally. However, the States were the first to allow us to use radio control gear, and I can't remember when it was. I think it was 2016, but again, Brian and Matt will probably remember better than me. I think it was 2016, because that was the first year I was going to enter, and I'd set up a model using, you know, RF. Some people adopted or adapted model car controllers, you know, these normal little pistol grip controllers where you got a little finger trigger, and they took the electronics out, put it into a handle. So the handle still operated the elevator, but your RC car controller had a little finger pull that you could operate the throttle on. And obviously some of these had more than one channel, so you could then operate other bits and pieces with it. I didn't really go for that. I went for hanging a transmitter on a tray around my neck, because flying RC, I was quite comfortable with using my left hand to operate the throttle. The tray keeps the radio stable, because obviously you've only got one hand, so it's important to be able to let go of it if you have to. I fly with flap and throttle on mine, so the flap is on a switch on the transmitter as well, and I'm quite comfortable. You can probably see slight curve in the line there, which is what I was talking about before, which reduces the rake of the lead out angle. So you've got to play around with these things to get it just right. With my setup, and you can probably see the tray there, it's only a cheap fiberglass tray, but it works quite well. My big problem is, when I flew control line as a kid, I always flew with my left hand in my pocket, because all you were flying was round and round and stunts and stuff like that. So when I started doing control line scale, my hand immediately went into my pocket. And I mean, it had been 40 years since I'd flown, so I don't know why that happened, but it just did. And whenever I wanted to touch the throttle, I couldn't find it. I got my hand out of my pocket, and then I couldn't find it on the transmitter. And it's taken a long time to teach me to actually keep my hand on the transmitter while I'm flying. But I seem to be coping okay now. But for a while, it was a bit of a stumbling block. I've got an odd way of doing this as well, because what I can do on sorry, there was an alert came up on there. But what I can do with my setup is I have several model memories set on the transmitter. One obviously is to fly at control line in competition, and in competition, only the throttle stick operates, and the flap switch operates the flaps. But I can go to another model memory, at which point the trim works, the rudder trim and the aileron trim. This allows me to tweak the model a little bit in practice to get it exactly how I like it. Then once I've got that, I can take the trim settings and transfer them or hard code them into the model, so that the model will always hold the ailerons and rudder where I want them. The servos that are in there will drive, you know, even if they get knocked, it doesn't matter, they'll go back to where I had preset them. But I can't alter them during flight. That's quite important. You're not allowed to do that. But I can alter them when I'm testing. I just select a different model memory. Right. There we. So this leads me on to RC and control line in the same airframe, which is something I thought this might be a bit of fun. So as I've alluded to there, the rudder and the ailerons work on my control line models, and I still do on the current ones. And what this means is I can use the model for RC, or I can use the model for control line. The wingtip is held on with a magnet, and then I can just take the lead out guide off and put the magnetic wingtip back on. The opposite tip, the outboard tip, again is held on with a magnet. Take that off. I'm going to remove the weight that's on the outboard side, put the tip back on, and away I go. The let's see what we'll go on to it in a second. But one thing I just want to say before we go on to show you what's inside the model. I love that picture because it's terrific, and to me, you look at that and you think that's really good. It looks right, you know, it looks really good. But being a scale model, and you probably all see the same thing when you fly your models, you think, where's the lower VHF aerial gone? It's fallen off. And instead of looking at something like that and saying, oh, isn't that lovely? We don't. We look at it and say, where's the aerial gone? Scale models for you. Isn't it? Right, inside, this isn't the Chipmunk. This is a Hawker Fury that I've built. And this is to show you what's going on with the bell crank inside in an RC stroke control line model. So here's, where's that gone? Oop. Excuse me a second. Go back again. Press the wrong key. So this area here, that's the pivot bolt, bell crank. These two bolts here actually hold the top wing section onto the model. This is looking down through the top. So the bell crank is in here, and you can see the lead outs here. They're actually coiled up just temporarily. So this push rod back here goes to the right to the elevator, and this push rod here goes forward to the elevator servo. And if I take that forward push rod off, then I can fly a control line. if I just leave the lead outs loose in the fuselage like that, and the servo connected to the elevator, I can use the elevator via RC. What else we got? This is the front of that Fury that I was just showing you. So you can see in the bottom left here, that's the elevator servo driving that push rod that you just saw. And I simply disconnect that if I want to fly at control line. This model's got a Neuron 80 ESC, 5065 motor there. It's also interesting because it's got a Benedini sound system on it, which I haven't seen one fly control line yet, but it should be interesting. So the controls for the amplifier are here and for the spare battery backup. The receiver pack's sitting here. It's two, well, it comes to 5400. In total, it's two 5S's in parallel. Leaping back a bit, this is the inside of the Chipmunk that you saw earlier, and this is looking, so the two bits of balsa that you can still ply that you can see here are the wing seats. So you're looking into the model with it upside down. So directly under the front seat, there's a servo with an arm to the bell crank, and the lead outs go out through here like that, and there you see the push rod. So in this case, this linkage is the one that I would disconnect if I want to fly control line, and then connect if I want to fly RC. As you can see, the rudder servo's in there, it's waiting for the pulls to go in and stuff. And also what you have got to make sure you do is you reinforce the fuselage quite considerably where the bell crank is. We have to undergo a 5 times the weight of the model pull test whenever the lines are connected to the model or the handle. So if they remain connected throughout the day, which is why our lines are laid out in a straight line along the edge of the circle, every time they are disconnected or whenever they're connected, we have to do a pull test. This model, I can't remember what the pull test is. It's somewhere around 35 pounds. But if you imagine you've got to try and hang on to your model while some bloke at the other end, usually Matt, is pulling with a weight, a spring weight on the end of the handle until he hits 35 pounds. It's the most scary moment of your competition day, because if anything cracks, creaks or breaks, you've had it. And it's a lot of weight to put through a very lightweight airframe. This model only weighs 6 pounds in total with the batteries in it. So this is the one that I was doing for this year, but it's ended up, it's not accurate enough, but it's a Sea-Fury. It's again from the Dennis Bryant plan, and it flies both RC and control line, but it hasn't yet flown. Those of you that may get RCM&E magazine, the unpainted airframe appears in the pages this month. It's obviously stuff I wrote quite some time ago. I was quite lucky. I managed to write 6 months worth of articles and fire them all off in one batch, so I've had the summer off, which has been brilliant. There's another view of the Fury. It's 60 inches span, powered by a 5065 270 kV motor. It's got a single, well, it's got two 5S 2700 milliamp packs. The prop is a 2010, and the sound system is a Benedini with a Class D amp, which is a lot more efficient. The model weight, this model weighs 4 pounds and spans 60 inches. That's 4 pounds with the batteries and with a pound sound system. So I'm really quite pleased with that one. There are two sets of wing struts. The inboard struts have guides, and the outboard struts have lead weights sunk inside the strut. So that's how you get your weight. So you swap your struts around, disconnect the elevator, and you go fly RC. I had the bonkers idea that I thought one of the nationals I'd try and fly control line and scale with the same model. That was the idea with the Chipmunk, was to turn up at control line, get through the static judging, fly 3 or 4 flights with it there, and then wander over to the square and fly it over there in something standoff or something. But it's never really happened. I did have a few words with a few people just to make sure it was actually legal, and nobody could see, nobody could say that it wasn't. So I don't know, one day, maybe I'm bonkers enough to still try it. Who knows? So scale control line competition, it's very similar to RC in that you have maneuvers that you have set maneuvers that you have to do and optional maneuvers that you choose from, and then you do. It's very rare these days to see anybody do any aerobatics, unless it's a very aerobatic, pits or something like that. But even then, you don't really tend to see anybody risk their model by doing aerobatics, which is a bit of a shame. But I believe, and others on here, probably witnessed some of these flights and what have you, but Mick Reeves and Dave Platt, when they were doing scale control line, did do aerobatics. I don't know whether they did or not. It may be just something I've read or something I've misremembered, but it would be nice. But my chipmunk should loop, but no, I'm not doing that. It's actually flying 2 crosswind legs and an upwind leg every 5 seconds. It really is, it does focus your mind, because with RC, the wind is coming from one direction and it's fine, and you can have just a 2 mile-an-hour wind and you think, oh, that's lovely, it's perfect, fantastic. But for control line, that's you're shooting through all of those angles constantly, and the line goes light, then it goes heavy, then the model slows right down, then you've got to feed in the up elevator, and you're trying to keep it level. If you can imagine flying little tiny tight circles with the RC model and keep it stable and level and smooth, it's not as easy as it looks. So and it's quite often why when you go over to the control line circle, the scale guys, there's nothing happening. It's because we're waiting for that window of weather. It's just the way it is. But anyway, it's the way it is. So as I said before, we've got some mandatory maneuvers and a list of optional maneuvers. So sorry, a bit of a busy slide, but I think this is still current. So you've got K factors for all the various maneuvers. You've got to do a takeoff. Well, you don't have to do a takeoff, but once you've started, you've got to finish. Then there's 5 laps of straight and level flight, which a lot of people come along and see that, and they just think, oh, well, the model's just going round and round. Well, that's one of the maneuvers. Then you've got your 4 optionals, which you can choose, and I'll show you in a second. Then you've got landing, which is mandatory. And within that, you've then got the realism of flight, sound, speed, smoothness, and this sort of stuff. Same really as the RC stuff. But, and then you've got your K factors and your numbers and you multiply, and there's 2 judges. So, right, just going to quickly talk about the heights at which normal flight is, because everybody assumes, and I did when I first came into it, was that you'll see that there's low flight at 2 meters, and we all assume that flying straight and level round and round, that's where you should be. But actually, normal flight is 6 meters. So when you do your normal flight 5 laps, you should be sat at 6 meters. You'll see there's a high flight level of 30 and a very high flight level of 45. And one of the optional maneuvers is to fly between 30 and 45 degrees for 5 consecutive laps. And I tell you, I am giddy. I'm about to fall over when I try and do that maneuver, but it's one of the options. I do it with the flying only model because it hasn't got anything else I could do. But I really am close to falling over at the end of that maneuver. So I'm just going to quickly whiz through something that I learnt. I didn't learn fast enough, but I did learn eventually, that there's a line in the rules. Normally, this is how the drawing is shown in the rule book, and it shows that you take off towards the judges, you just become airborne, just in front of the judges, then you climb, and then you call finish, and that's all in 1 lap. And I tried to do that, and it rushes everything, and you can't do it smoothly. It just doesn't look right. Well, the clue is the maneuver may, depending on the subject aircraft, take more than 1 lap to complete. Just slow it down. Just take your time. And actually, that was key to me doing better in 2019 than I did in the previous years. I hadn't read that line. And as Andy Sefton will tell you, read the rules, then read them again, and then go and read them again. And then later on, read again. And he's right. So this is again, I'm talking about mandatory maneuvers here. So that's that 6 meter height, normal, level, smooth flight for 5 laps. Usually at the event, Matt will stick a great big fishing pole type thing at the side of his caravan, which is quite handy because it gives you the height at which you should try and fly, which is, we're all grateful to that, Matt. So landing, again, I thought landing, you see it on the drawing, you start, you put your flaps down and you land. But Oh, sorry, that's the level flight. Landing. So you start, you descend, you touch down, and you come to a stop just in front of the judges. That's in your ideal world. That's what you're heading for. But actually, you can't do it in one circuit. But look, there's a line in there. The landing may take more than 1 lap to finish. I do it in two laps, and it works then, it's fine. You try and do it in one, as you'll see, there's a video later and you'll see. Try and do it in one and it just doesn't really work. So the optional maneuvers, I won't go into everything because it'll just bore you to death. Optional maneuvers, there's a handful there, but actually in reality we can't really use them because although my aircraft is in theory aerobatic, I really haven't got the gonads to do aerobatic. The lazy 8 is incredibly difficult to do as control line. So is the figure 8. Wing over is even quite difficult, believe it or not, as Matt will attest to when he was doing really well and stood a good chance of winning at the Nationals a couple of years ago, and attempted a wing over with his SC5A, and it's a very difficult. Everything goes light as it goes over the top, and it went too light for him, and he couldn't pull out in time, and it hit the dirt. So there's a lot of maneuvers there that we can't actually do. So my optionals are retract and extend flaps, so I can at least lower the flaps. And then you're supposed to do 3 laps, but again, you'll see in the video I got that wrong. But you're supposed to do 3 laps with the flaps extended. I only did 1. The other one I do is a touch and go, which has been modified slightly now that we can do it on mains. Taxi demonstration. This is where you have to taxi for a quarter of the circle in a realistic manner. There's an overshoot and a go round, which is, approach, get it slightly wrong, and then get to under a meter and then pull up and go away again. You've got to remember you're doing all this at very low speed with the wind, downwind, upwind, crosswind, and it's not easy to fly really slow right on the limit of the model like that and keep it at the same height. It's not as easy as it looks. So this is another one of the optional maneuvers, or this is one of those optional maneuvers. And again, I just wanted to point out, you see, that you start, you roll in front of the judges. What you're supposed to do is land a minimum of 5 meters before the judges, roll in front of them, and then take off again just after them. That's all actually quite difficult to do precisely, again, with all those winds doing whatever they want to do. But as Andy would say, read the rules, because the descent prior to touchdown may take more than 1 lap, and that's critical, because you can't do this in a slow, smooth, progressive manner in 1 lap. It's too rushed. So so that's the bit that I never read, 5 or 6 times before I saw it. But anyway, it's key. So don't worry, nearly there. You've nearly survived me. This was a lovely cartoon. I think it was in Ron Moulton's book that Andy gave me. I think it's great. I could just see me in a few years' time, 35, 36, 37, counting the rivets. Brilliant. I love it. But it's more than just rivet counting. So what I've got here is, and I don't know whether Brian and Matt can unmute themselves, because I wouldn't mind their input on some of these pictures, because this one I know is Mike Chapman's P-51 Mustang, built from the Brian Taylor kit with a very noisy IC engine in front. But it flies very well, and he's been champion more than once. And it's a really nice flying model.
It's also quite entertaining when you have the bombs flying at you.
Yeah, if you're curious about this, he releases the bombs as part of his maneuvers. And I've got a video on YouTube, if anybody wants to look it up, of the bombs hitting those 2 judges sat in this session here. So I don't. He should lose marks for that, shouldn't he, Brian? That's not really cricket.
We did think about it.
He nearly took me out. I nearly rolled off the back of my chair trying to get out of the way of the bloody things, but it gets him his points.
I think Richard was still marking at the time.
Yeah, he kept his eye on the model, didn't he? He didn't flinch. Yeah. Very impressive. This one, oh, that's yeah, that was there as well, wasn't it? But,
I recognise that one.
Yeah. I don't know what that is. It's got to be a Ronnie Tribe.
It's Ronnie Tribes, yes.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It's a oh,
I think it was a
Yes, German.
Horton, that's it. Yeah,
It's probably a Horton of some sort, isn't it?
Yeah.
yeah.
But I don't know which one. But I mean, Ronnie does build some absolutely amazing models. But,
He'll never go for straightforward ones.
no, he doesn't. Can you identify any of those? The B17, a Focke-Wulf, P51, a 262, is it? And
262, yeah.
what's the 4-engine?
That's
That's Beverly.
Beverly?
Blackburn Beverly.
Blackburn
Yeah.
Beverly.
Was that Ronnie again?
No, that's not a Beverly.
Oh, York.
No, not Blackburn Beverly. Sorry, not. It's,
Bro York.
It's a York. Yeah.
York,
Okay.
that's it.
Sorry,
York.
York.
Yes. Sorry, yeah.
I get the wrong
Thanks,
year.
John.
That was
Well spotted.
that was Mike Walsh's.
Mike Walsh, yeah.
Mike Walsh. Okay, great, brilliant. Thank you. This is why I was hoping you'd join, chaps. These two retrobates with the flight judges. That's Richard, isn't it? And
Richard, yeah.
yeah, and Brian, obviously.
And
The
myself.
flight judges. They're always very relaxed at the control line circle. Yeah, and there's always a cup of tea if you wander over there. But very friendly
Kettle's always on
bunch.
the go.
It is indeed. What else we got next? That's mine again. There was an interesting thing on mine that I don't know many people saw, but on the Chipmunk, it has a little vent pipe that sticks up, fuel tank vent pipe. And it sits such that my lead out clip can sit right over it. And if that happened in flight, I would lose complete control. That would really scupper me.
Yeah.
So once static is done and the flying's going to happen, I have to snap that one off and then repair it every year. I must do a magnet or something so I can remove it. But it would, yeah, it would be. Or do something different with the lead out lines. I don't know, but yeah, I've got to do something, but it's a bit odd. Where we got now? That's B17. Is that Mike again? I don't know.
That one I think was actually one of Ronnie Tribe's.
Ronnie Tribes,
One of
yeah.
Ronnie's. Okay. It's a lovely model. I don't think I saw it fly that year.
No, it didn't.
No, it did. It flew like the clappers, though.
Oh, she was, yeah.
Brilliant. That's Mike Chapman's P51 again. I don't know who this guy is. This was your first own design, wasn't it, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. So this is some static judging going on. Yep, indeed. There's that B17 again.
Interesting note with that one, the B17 had engine sounds on it and cannon fire.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I must have missed that. Well, I don't think I saw it fly that year, so I don't think I'd entered. No, was there? Oh, I don't know.
Remember whose that was?
B17
Oh,
doesn't
lovely.
have cannons.
Could
Well,
be
that
right,
was-
yeah.
Was that Ronnie's again?
That's
Ronnie's.
right.
That was his main entry, yeah.
Yeah, lovely model. Then I can't remember whose this one was, but it was 2014, 15, something like that. 2015.
So that one was Pete Tribe, Ronnie's brother.
Yeah.
Okay, Pete tried. You remember earlier I was talking about the lead out angles, and if you get the vertical CFG not quite right, you can end up with the wingtip low. And to me, it doesn't look right when the model is sitting with the outboard wing down like that. But, and that's all to do with the vertical CFG and your lead out height up the struts in this case.
You also, too, if I don't want to interrupt you at that point, if you're judging it, it doesn't look right. Oh, my God.
Do you remember that one, Brian?
Yeah, I didn't know I was that active.
When you do, it's the same with RC. The model must be stationary with engine running and mustn't move. It mustn't creep. So Brian is very clearly showing that he's not holding it, holding Matt's model back at all before takeoff. This is Mike Chapman's Zero, I think. Yeah.
He is, yeah.
I think he won a few times with that, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lovely model. I saw it, the one obviously when I took the photos, but a lovely model. You can again see the wire being taken off the flying lines to go into the fuselage to drive the surfaces. Did he drop bombs on that one as well? Drop the tank?
He did.
Got the tank, yeah.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Thank you. Right, a couple of little videos. The first one, I'm only going to show you a bit of it because you don't want to see it all. It's, as I was saying before, for somebody that's not familiar with control line and what people are trying to do, it looks very samey. And I apologize for that, but you've got to be part of it to understand it. It's the same with RC. I think if somebody goes to an RC event and they see somebody doing, you know, a procedure turn or something like it, it initially looks quite, I hate to use the word dull, but unless you're actually active in the sport, you don't understand what's going on. So the key points on this video, this is the maiden flight of my Chipmunk. And it's only the second control line flight that I'd made in 40 years. The first being about a month before with a PT-19 trainer thing that was absolutely horrid, but I did manage to get around and not smash it. So this is only the second flight in 40 years. It was also the first time I'd ever flown a scale model on control line. All my models prior to that were stunt things that I couldn't actually, I could do a loop and that was it, but that was 40 years ago. It was also the maiden of the model in control line format. And it was my first Nats, first round at the Nats with no practice. So the fact that this actually happened, I nearly fell over because I was so astounded. Let's see, keep going. My daughter was the spotter for this and she had the most fantastic Nats you can imagine. But this was the roll. I'd never flown a scale control line model. It hadn't flown control line. And I mean, it's a very uneasy flight. It's up and down a bit because I flew too slowly. But what was, I nearly fell over at that point. I said, it flies, you know. And I mean, Brian and Matt couldn't hear what I was saying at the outside of the circle, but I was just about falling over with Cracker's pottiness. I don't know, it's silly. I'm going to go to, I'm not going to let you watch all that because it just goes round and round. I'm going to go to about there, and you'll see this is my first landing in control line scale. So it was going to touch down there, which is no good. So a quick burst of power, and then it settles there. So not brilliant, but not where it should be. But I was dead chuffed. So the next one, Matt's going to cringe at this, I'm sure. But let's see if we can go forward. This is the last bit. Once this is over, you can all go to sleep, if you're not already asleep. But it's quite an interesting video because it gives you my eyes view of a competition flight. And there's errors, which also kind of makes it interesting. And also because it's electric, you can hear me and Matt talking about what's going on, which is quite interesting. I don't know whether Brian's already seen this, but anyway, we'll run it and see. I hope it's smooth enough for you guys and the bandwidth is enough.
Engine enabled.
That's cool. So no change to the sheet, I think. It's just going to stay the way it is. You ready? Yeah. So, taking off. Now. That was with partial flaps as per full size.
My particular model takes off
Finished.
Typically with partial flaps.
Flaps up.
The model's flying a lot.
Okay, 5 laps straight and level.
We'll skip through the 5 laps.
Starting. Am I high enough, Matt? Now. Five. Complete. What we got next?
Flaps demonstration.
Flap demonstration.
Yeah.
I think I got one more lap, haven't I?
No, just now and then it'll be as you pass.
Okay. Starting now.
I should have done 3 laps of the flaps and I only did 1.
Partial flaps.
Read the rules. You can see Matt lying on the job.
Flaps down. Partial flaps.
1 lap.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
2 minutes. Flaps up.
How many laps was I supposed to do with the flaps down?
3.
I lost on that one. What's the next one then?
Okay, so push it down, overshoot is the next one.
Okay. Overshoot next. Starting now.
Matt, a big debt of thanks for all of his calling.
Partial flaps.
Couldn't have done this without him.
Flaps down.
You see, the key is to take more than one lap to do the manoeuvre. It makes it much smoother. Matt and Brian are going to probably tell me now that you're not supposed to do that, but that was my interpretation of it.
Partial flaps. Flaps up.
Complete.
3 minutes.
Okay. Touch and go next.
You can see normal flight is quite high. It's a lot higher than you'd think.
Starting now.
This is the touch and go. I'm aiming to touch down.
And this is touch and go, isn't it?
Touch down just before the judges, roll past the judges, and then take off again just after the judges. I should have taken off 20 yards sooner. A lot sooner. But the touchdown point was good.
Flaps up.
Complete.
4.
And then we just got the final
What
move.
we got next?
Landing next.
Is that it?
That's it.
How have I done then, Matt? No, don't tell me. Landing next. Starting now. Ooh, there was a buffet. Buffet off the something.
Partial flaps. Flaps down.
Because the line tension is so light on my model, I feel everything. You know, any undulations or any lift or thermals or anything. Now I probably rolled on too far here, but the manoeuvre next is a taxi, and I wanted to bring it
Partial
to the
flaps.
right
Up.
line.
Sorry? Taxi next. I'll stop on the line, then I know my quarter, and I'll taxi up to them.
So again, you have to be stationary with the motor still running.
Taxi!
No creep, and then you have to taxi up to the judges, quarter of a turn of a circle, and then come to a halt with the motor still spinning.
It's a quarter of a lap, isn't it?
This is quite difficult in a wind because you've got to get your model set up just right, because of course, you know, you're going crosswind, downwind, and the thing wants to swing, and you've got no rudder. You've got no rudder control, so you've got to have got all of this set up properly. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Complete.
Engine disabled.
So again, big thank you to Matt for that. Couldn't have done it without his help. And there we go. That's my brief squint into control line scale. I hope it's given you a bit of an insight into what it's all about. It's very similar to RC in that you've got set maneuvers that you have to achieve, and you have to fly as smoothly as you can. And you've still got to build a model that, you know, that looks the part. But, so there you go. Thank you. Over to you, Graham, or Andy, whichever one's driving.
Okay, thanks for that, Danny.
Welcome.
I've learned an awful lot there. It's an awful lot more complicated inside than I thought it was.
It's a little bit more, yeah.
In saying that, I didn't know what it was like inside. As I say, slight change to how we're doing it. As Andy said, a slight change to how we're doing the questions tonight, just because I've had to join in my tablet, so it's difficult to monitor the participants window as well. But just going through a couple of questions that were there, Adrian Hayward had asked, was there minimum and maximum line lengths allowed in scale competition? And Paul's come back and said in the FEI rules, F4B, it is minimum 15 meters and max 21.5 meters. And then Mark Travers, I think it is, has sort of said,
feet.
Not sure what the BMFA side of things is, but the smaller models tend to use shorter lines. but he's using 60-foot lines on a 91 4-stroke Spitfire. That 60 lines almost equates to your 21.5 meters, I think.
Yeah. I think I'm flying on 60 feet, maybe 70s, I can't remember, 60, 65, somewhere around there.
I'm not sure what size the tarmac circle is going to be at Buckminster. So certainly that's something I need to invest.
Well, hopefully they would have thought of that.
I think
our understanding is it is a 65-foot circle afterwards with Paul Eisner.
Paul Eisner, yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. And then speaking, since Brian and Matt have answered there, you were talking about balancing the throttle. So all 3 lines balance each other for the throttle. For me, that's a complete Luddite with control line. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so the idea of the old 3-line system is exactly as Danny says, the 3rd line pulled and it made that extra bell crank move. But what you can't see from the static photo is that as you pulled on the 3rd line to move that bell crank, it actually offset the entire bell crank itself backwards.
The whole thing would move actually in and out.
Oh, blimey, I didn't know that, but I've never operated one, so even worse.
So ultimately, all lines stayed in tension, but yeah.
My father's flew control line scale with that system for years, and always his bugbear trying to sort out all 3 lines before he took off.
Yeah, well imagine. Okay.
And then Martin Kinder had asked, the description says the model should start from stationary with the engine running. This implies that a throttle is mandatory. Is that correct? And I think from what you said, Danny.
Yeah, that is correct as well.
Yeah. You couldn't do anything without. But,
no.
He also asked where was the height reference pole in the video?
It's not in that video, funnily enough. I think it was too early in the morning. But, we wait. Sorry?
You say that's normally beside the caravan, is that right?
Yeah, it's normally beside the caravan, but that weekend we were waiting for, I mean, everybody was saying it was fantastic weather and it was gloriously sunny. It was lovely. It was a really nice weekend. But for control line, it wasn't actually particularly, it wasn't perfect because there was gusts coming from one direction all day, and it wasn't till late in the day that we hoped we'd get a flight. And the wind didn't drop. It usually drops at about 4 o'clock, and we were all hanging around waiting for that, and it didn't happen. We ended up on Bank Holiday Monday, still having not really got serious flights in. So I think that was 8 in the morning, wasn't it, Matt? Brian, something like that. We did that.
Really early in the morning.
Yeah, I think their bacon butties were still getting cold, but the pole hadn't been put up at that time. So
no,
it is normally there by the caravan. It's one of those banner type glass fiber poles.
Yeah, we usually take it down in the evening because we get buzzed by the free flight in the evening, and if we keep the pole up, we tend to swap them out the sky.
Yeah.
So we take the pole down in the evening.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian and Matt are actually part of the Cordwell family Destiny and
Despair.
Get my words out there. Destiny and Scale Control Line. Brian's late father Wall was an advocate of the discipline for a long time, and in actual fact, when Dad and I attended the first team trials for him and when it used to be joint RC and control line, then it was Wall flying his Judel.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Which was the first I had met him. That's back in 2002, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, and Brian and Matt have continued the legacy.
Following on, hopefully I've got a grandson that might be following me up as well, because at 2 years old he's absolutely crazy about aeroplanes, so I keep my fingers crossed.
That's good nowadays.
Cool. Is anyone else got any questions for Danny or Brian or Matt?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it,
Yeah.
John.
Danny, you mentioned your daughter was being a spotter. Is
Yeah.
that the same as the guy lying on the floor telling you what to do during the
That's
video?
basically it. Yeah,
Oh.
the first year I entered, I bullied Roisin into joining me in the circle, and she loved it. She was doing the maths between the rounds, and I think coming to the last round, she came up to me and she said, "I've done the sums. You're in the lead." And I said, "No, you know." And I'm looking at the score sheet trying to add it up, and she's done it all in her head. And she says, "No, you're in the lead." But in the last flight, I just nosed it over on the taxi, and I think it broke the prop, and that just about threw away the points, which was a bit unfortunate. But yeah, she's the spotter, so she counts the number of laps. So that picture there where she's holding her hand up, she doesn't need to use her fingers to count the number of laps, but she was counting the 5 level flight laps off for me. And it's probably one of the most memorable points in my life, because it was such a family thing. It was a big softie, I suppose, but it was good. I really enjoyed that one. So we had team T-shirts and stuff. So it was a bonding weekend. She went along purely for the fish and chips by the hangar in the evenings, which are amazing. So good weekend, really good.
Yeah, I'll just point out the reason I was lying down on the job wasn't because I was being lazy, but I don't like my head being taken off with cheese wires.
No, indeed. No, I don't blame you. But, I do have a relaxed stance where the handle's quite low, I think. It's not good. Not good for my spotter.
No.
No, indeed. It's a shame that people don't do it. Don't take part. But there we go. We'll get older.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On the ground roll for the touch and go, is it that you're aiming for 5 meters, or is that a minimum?
It's a minimum, I think.
Minimum.
Again, Brian, is that right?
Yeah, minimum. It's a minimum of it, yeah.
Yeah. So my roll might have been all right.
Yeah.
The touchdown point was good, I thought, and it didn't bounce, which is what you're aiming for. But I remember one of the early flights, Brian, didn't it? I think it was flight number 2. My touch and go went on for 2 laps. It just bounced. It did an absolutely true chipmunk landing.
Yeah.
It just bounced for 2 laps, and I was determined I was going to get this thing to roll along for at least 5 meters. I think it did it on the 2nd lap, but nil point. all good fun.
Yeah. It's the biggest problem with control line models. It's getting it to sit on the ground and stay there once it's there, because they do, as you say, go around all circuits of the wind. It does like to catch it and lift it again when you don't expect it,
or swing towards you. It will just sit on the ground, and the wind will catch it, and it'll blow it at you. So it can be quite fluky.
Bill Kingsbury, do you want to ask your question?
Are you there, Phil? I can read it out if you want.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, the only one I take part in is the Nationals, so it's all a bit sudden for me. I don't get any practice or anything like that. I don't hear of many others taking place. There are a few. I think some of the old Warden days they fly some scale. Yeah, but it tends to be off grass. Yeah, and my chipmunk doesn't like grass. It bogs it down something rotten, and then it starts weaving, and then it can all end up in a bit of a session. I think Brian and Matt run stuff down in London. Croydon, is it? I think you might.
Croydon, yeah, but at the moment we're having motorcycle trouble.
Oh, okay.
So getting the patch clear is a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Okay. So to answer your question, Phil, I don't think there are very many events, but if we get the circle at Buckminster, that might all change. You'd never know. We might be able to do a bit more. Yeah. So.
Can I ask another
You'll
question?
find if you can.
Yeah, sure.
Are the judges placed in relation to the wind direction?
We try and always feed ourselves where we're in the right place for the wind, so that the downwind on the side of the circle.
And they've got to be near the kettle. It's
absolutely, yeah.
So how does that affect the landing?
Well, the landing is where it's supposed to be. So if it's slightly downwind or slightly crosswind, it's how it is. But we try not to arrange it so it's that bad. But
okay.
you're not usually downwind, but you could well be crosswind when you actually touch down. So and you know what the weather is like at Berks, and it could be in one direction 1 minute and then 90-degree shift the next. So,
there has been sessions when you're judging when you're working all the way around the circle.
Yeah, they do pick the chairs up and move. So
Adrian Hayward had his hand up.
The same question was asked just now about where the judges get placed. So that was just going to be my question.
Yeah, near the kettle.
Near the kettle.
It's a very relaxed weekend. You know, Brian and Matt run it as a very informal type event, and that makes it quite refreshing. When I joined RCM&E as the scale columnist, that was the first time I really met these guys, because I was obviously taking photos for the magazine and what have you. And they were really friendly. They made me a cup of tea, and Brian, Matt, Mike, and Bernard was especially helpful. And I took lots of pictures of handles and all sorts of bits and pieces. And I promised at that point that I'd have a go and take part. But one of the things I really like, and one of the things I think I'm supposed to do as scale columnist for RCM&E, is go out and find the things that need a bit of a prod and a bit of support and a bit of publicity maybe, and try and get it into the magazine. So that was what I tried to do with the control line scale. I also have tried to do it with the RC indoors, and that is to try and, you know, take part in it, soak it up, write about it, hopefully show it in a good light, and show that everybody's very enthusiastic. They're all friendly, and they're not offish. They're not standoffish. They'll welcome you whatever you like. I mean, they were really helpful for me until I did my first flight to the Nationals. Then everybody went quiet. It was really strange. Oh dear, he can fly. Oh, what are we going to do now? But no, it's been really brilliant. They're a really friendly lot, and you know, they'll spend their time fixing your engine or whatever, or showing you what to do. So if you've got any thoughts about having to go, then, you know, do it. It's good fun. It's good fun.
We'd be delighted to see you there.
Yes, indeed.
Could I just ask, what was the percentage of electric to IC models now?
Oh,
I was going to say about 50-50 at the moment.
50-50, I would have said, yeah. There's still IC, but but some of the more unusual models, certainly Ronnie's ducted fans and multi-engine. What was that last one he flew last year, Brian? It was a 12. Was it 12 motors he had in? It was 6 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's Stratocruiser or something.
Yeah.
Could be 6 or 7 engines, 6 or 8 engines on the thing.
Yeah. So motors. That was ducted fan.
Yeah.
Had a massive battery in it. I don't know how much the thing weighed, but
it's getting quite warm by the end of the flight.
Yeah, but it was. So it seems to be 50-50 really. You know.
Okay, if we got one last question.
Is there some sort of limit on? Is it governed by a weight limit or a size limit? The aircraft.
Ryan, do you want to answer that one?
There is a weight limit.
Right. Okay.
Do you know what?
Sorry, Danny.
I was going to say I can't remember what it is because I always operate at the low end of it. So you know, as long as
I can't remember offhand because the rule book's upstairs.
Yeah,
I've got a feeling 7 kilos is the limit.
It sounds about right.
Yeah, I think it's 7 kilos is the limit.
Yeah, it is.
I think Andrew's just going to have a look.
That sounds quite a hefty model.
It is, yeah. You would think that the line tension would be horrendous on a big heavy model like that, and if you flew it fast and you had your lead out angles all wrong, it would pull you over. It would certainly drag you around the airfield. But that's why you adjust your lead out angles and everything else to try and control the weight of the model on the line. I could fly with just 2 fingers on my chipmunk. It's really, really light, and I don't know whether that's right or not because I've got no reference point. That's how I've tried it and figured it out. And I might find that if I flew in any wind at all, the thing would be useless. So perhaps I do need to increase the line tension. It should be flying a bit faster. In that first flight you saw, the model was undulating quite a bit, and that was because I was flying it too slowly. I only had to put one click of more power in, and all of a sudden the speed went up a little bit. You couldn't really tell from inside the circle, and I don't think people really could from outside, but it suddenly went so much more stable. And I think that's the same with RC. Sometimes we try to go so slow that the model is hanging on the edge of stability, and you need to just throttle it a bit more, and everything starts to fly properly. Just how I think it should be done, but I don't know whether it's right. I've not got years of experience of this. 2016 was my first go. So
I think one of the models that Roll flew, we had to bolt him to the floor while he flew because it had that much of a pull on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't even that big an engine.
The weight limit, it says the maximum weight of the complete model in flying condition without fuel, but including any dummy pilot, shall be 6 kilograms. Except that a model of a multi-engine subject shall be 7 kilograms.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's it. Thank you. I knew somebody would have this rule to hand.
Yeah.
Read the rules.
Absolutely.
But that's the British rules.
That's a British rule. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. But we don't do it at international level at the moment, do we, Pierre?
Oh,
no.
That's but it's a little wrong because in the Eastern Europe there is actually competition all the time.
Okay.
They have one big event in Switzerland each year. And
yeah.
There's going to be one in, I don't know if it's Poland or the Czech Republic next year. I mean 21. But hopefully we could do more. But the thing is, we have to, again, like with the free flight, we need to change some rules here and there because it's not been done anything since I think 98, 99.
That'd be about right, yeah.
Yeah, so it should, like the thing with using a RC radio is forbidden in the FIA rules.
Okay.
Shouldn't be any problems to change that. The weight limit is 7 kilos nevertheless. I also can see that you have to taxi before taking off and then taxi after you landed, so slightly change, but we can do the same thing with them that we will do with the free flight. It's not a problem. The good thing with the F4B is it's still a championship class. They talked about, I think it was 2 years ago when I was elected for the first time, they talked about making it a provisional class, but I refused. So it's still a championship class.
Okay.
And hopefully, because there is some here and there doing it, but there's a lot of people from the Eastern Europe that does it. I think it will be possible to get a championship together if we try to. The problem was that there was nobody. There was one guy that actually didn't like it, and he, in a way, forced it out from a regular scale championship, and it's never been inside since, and that's a little pity, I think.
Yeah.
That's why I hope that maybe we can do it in UK. If UK get the championships in 24, it would be great if they have a circle at Buckminster, because it's still a championship class, so why not?
Yeah.
How many circles would we need to hold a world championship? Just one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something we need to aim for then, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can use the same static judges. You just need some different flight judges. I think you need more qualified people. And then again, I have trouble inside FIE because we don't have those people on the list at the moment. But that's not a problem. If we aim for it, we can get them. We can get judges on the list by, let's say, 2021. No, 2023. So we have them in the FIE judging list, so you can pick them out to do the competition. And I think you also need just 2.
That's going to be something to aim for then, looking at Doug Hunt and Brian Caldwell.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I mean, if we're aiming for 2024, then we've got enough time to do that. And we've also got enough time to think about how we would organise it. So, Brian, Matt, we'd like a bit more sort of interaction with you on that, I think.
There's the challenge, eh?
Yeah.
And, I will say that this is being recorded, so we have an auditable trail.
Well, the thing is, we need
a few weeks ago. Sorry.
Yeah, the thing is that inside the FIE system there is been just RC that's actually been talked about for the last years, and that's hopefully can change a little. But you know how it is. It takes time to change things, but I think we are getting somewhere.
Well, Pal, I mean, we haven't forgotten the alignment of the rules really on the free flight side, and it seems like we've got another little bit of a task to think about on the control line side. But you know, we can do that.
But on the I've checked on the control line. It's not that much. It's just small essence that it's out of. Let's say they are too old-fashioned, the ones. I mean, if most of the people or some people are starting to using, let's say, RC control for doing flaps and retract and so on, and they're doing that in the rest of the world, it's just stupid that it's not implemented to the sporting code.
Yes, yeah.
It's just small changes we have to do. That's not a big problem. And like I said, with the free flight, it's the problem is that we don't have anybody inside the community, the SIAM community, who knows free flight. That's why I asked you guys to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, look, we are one of the drivers on this, and I'm really encouraged to see that you're taking a positive view of the whole thing. I mean, the real problem was that somewhere in the past, there was a change made that we can't find how it happened. The original rules were quite different.
Yeah, I have not been inside the system so many years, but I know Mr. Norv Jensen my whole life, yeah, it's like the other sports. Things happen quite fast without nobody notice what's happening.
Exactly.
And I've seen that even also since Graham was chairman. We had Johan Eilers in the middle, and I took the after him. But there has been some change rules also in F4C and F4H that I can't find out how they were done. Because normally it was said that it's the subcommittee or the chairman or whatever who did the rule change. But there are some rule change that's been done down the road that it's impossible to find out who did it. And but we can't change what was, but we can change what is.
Yeah. And that'll be good, because at last we got somebody listening to us. Which is...
but the thing is, if you look at it, we have a scale. Especially in SIAM, everything is scale. If it's scale, it's scale. I mean, it's scale helicopter, is free flight, and it's into one committee. And we are so few that we need everyone and every class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ricky, this was why I sort of brought you in a conversation at the British Nats last year with Doug, so that we could.
Exactly.
So I could get a better understanding, and then I've obviously fed back to Paul as well. So it was about time it was done. It had sat there for a long time, and the rules had changed so many, gone through so many iterations that the FEI rules were quite different. But yeah, we're getting on to free flight now rather than control line.
I am flying control line, you know, so that's all right. It can be dangerous. Yeah.
And you've had the issue with kink lines as well, or a line breaking. So
we'll see. Well, it was a nice, very nice way to see and learn how it's done, because I have not seen it since '86 in Norway. The World Championships in Norway was the last time I saw a control line.
Mm-hmm.
So it was in some championships in Poland, but they were so far off, so we never saw them.
I think the camera on my hat was a good idea. It gives everybody a good feel of what it's like to be in the middle, trying to control it. So.
That was really good, Danny, because you did right. It showed you the model and how it was behaving.
Mm-hmm.
And to reference Doug's comment where he was saying about sort of us within the STC doing something a bit different, I definitely won't be trying control line. My engineering and geometry isn't there, so geometry should be, but my engineering wouldn't be.
Yeah, if you do it with radio control, it takes a lot of that away. I'm not sure I could have done it with that bell crank and assembly in the middle. And that's 3-line. They went up to 5-line, didn't they, Brian?
Oh yes, yes.
So if you imagine
there was one chap who
lines,
had 5 lines going down to the model, operated guns and throttle and God knows what else.
Yeah.
I was hearing
somebody here who flew scale in the middle of the Royal Tournament. Haven't you, Adrian?
Or up combat.
All right.
Hey.
World War I aircraft.
Maybe that's why we don't have the Royal Tournament anymore.
Best one we did.
It's deteriorating, I think, isn't it?
Thanks for all the comments. I'll just have one last one to end on. So Andrew, I've finally got to you. Andrew White, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks for that, Danny. That was brilliant. That's
glad you
really
enjoyed
well put together. Appreciated it. It seems you've made things more difficult for yourself by combining RC and control line in one model. Do you think there's an appetite for that as a new class, where you fly both disciplines with one aeroplane?
I don't know. That could be interesting. I don't know whether Pal's any thoughts on that. I know there's another guy on the call here, Mark Travis. He's built a Spitfire that he was hoping to fly at the Nats this year, but maybe the next time we have it. And he's built a Spitfire with a 90 in it, and that is RC and control line as well. So it seems to be catching on. Because we've got so few places we could fly control line, the idea is that you can actually use the model for other uses, and flying at RC is fairly obvious. You know, you fly at RC and then you can use it for control line as well. So it has its appeal, although my Chipmunk flies awfully as a RC model, so it will probably only ever come out for the control line Nats. I doubt I'd fly it again RC, but and it likes tarmac. It really doesn't like grass. The undercarriage is really delicate. The suspension in it is 2 ear defenders, and that's it. So when it's on the ground, it sits and squashes right down to be fully compressed. And then when it's in the air, the oleos extend, and it's you know, the legs are dangling in the wind. And when it settles down, they just go up into the oleos, and then these 2 earplugs are all the springing there is. So you put it on grass, and the legs flex, and it cracks the balsa in the wing, and it breaks the paint. It's just not any good. So I think it'll probably stay as a control line model.
Yeah.
But whether you could have an event where you fly at control line, then you have to turn around and fly at RC, I don't know. It's possibly a bit too novelty-ish. I don't know. Interesting.
A few years down the line.
I will say something on it, if I may. I've flown in 3 competitions with one model indoors, in peanut, open rubber and CO2, and I've also done it with an open rubber and a CO2 model. And I have to say, it's an ergonomic nightmare, because you've got to go into the queue for static judging twice, and in the queue for flying twice. And especially at Barkston, where you've got the control line at one end of the airfield and effectively the radio control at the other, as well as being in the queue for each part of the judging and being in the queue for the flying, you're at 2 separate flying sites.
Yeah.
So, and what you really don't want to do is have the judges look for your model and it's not there, because the last thing you want to do is annoy the judges before they're judging your model.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it puts a lot of pressure on to get the model at the right place.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it would be a bit too much of a novelty thing rather than a real goer. But interesting.
I only did it because Mike Hadland's not here today. Butch Hadland did it in the States with a CO2 Lacey that he did CO2 and rubber, just so that he could just take one model in his luggage. And I thought, well, Butch can do it, so can I. But I wouldn't do it again.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Danny?
Yeah, sure.
You were talking about other events outside of just the nationals, and I don't know whether Brian can answer this or yourself, but doesn't the Barton Club up in Manchester, don't they have hard tarmac circles?
Yeah, they do.
As a club,
They do.
Yeah. They're not. I tried to get access to the circles up there because I'm sort of halfway to them compared to Brian and Matt, to test my chipmunk, and I couldn't. You know, they're just so focused on racing that they wouldn't allow me onto the circles to test my model. I didn't go there. This was just in email correspondences with them, and they're obviously so focused on their racing and speed and stuff like this that they weren't very accommodating, shall we say. So that didn't happen. But I'm hoping if we get Buckminster, we can book the circle, and then you haven't got this conflict. So we'll see. But you know, I don't know what Brian and Matt think. Maybe we can hold 2 or 3 events in the year. That
it's certainly doable if you've got the circle there to do it with.
Yeah.
I mean, I have got the judges. Unfortunately, I lost one of my judges.
Yeah, it's
but
a shame. Yeah.
I think
Indeed.
in terms of the, competitions as well, you probably find quite often that the carrier deck competitions often have a scale element to them as well, because most of the carrier guys also fly scale and vice versa.
Okay.
Yeah.
What worried me, Brian, was when I hear that there's a lot of scale at Old Warden. Now I went there and I didn't really see very much. I saw Mike Chapman fly there, but I didn't see anybody else because there was a rumor going around that there's a lot of people flying scale, but they're not coming to the Nats. And I didn't understand what that was about.
Yeah, it seemed to blow hot and cold up there. You go up there one day and there's sort of scale models falling over them, and then you go there another day or another year and nothing. You know.
Yeah.
It seems to be sort of people turn up, fly, and then don't seem to come back again for whatever reason.
Yeah, you need to find out why that is and try and.
I mean, it may be because it's on the grass and it's difficult for them to fly scale models off of there. I don't know.
Yeah, indeed.
But I know there's a lot out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. What is it? Sorry, just catching up now. Mark Travers has also said that he used friendly school, then tennis courts when he first started in his teens. Depends. You need to be quite friendly, I think, for 60-foot lines. I'm trying to work out what size a tennis court is.
Yeah, it's not big enough. Not
quite big enough. No.
I there's a few school playgrounds that would have been, and I did try to get in, but it's quite difficult. We used to use in the States. We used to use the big car parks, the big supermarket car parks, because they were always shut on Sundays, and we'd go into the supermarket car park and fly all day Sunday. But now that they're open 24/7, it's removed that avenue, which is a shame.
Yet, just call it quits there. I think we could go on discussing how we could develop control line quite a bit. So it shows there's lots of enthusiasm for it. There's you've definitely heightened a lot of people's interest tonight, Danny. So thank you for that. Thank you for Andy for helping me host. It has been complicated being on a tablet and a mobile, but we've got there. And just to say that the next session on, remind me, Eric, November the 11th, is Eric Strefford, where we see another of the disciplines that Danny has promoted that he mentioned earlier. So an introduction to Scale RC Indoor. Eric, do you want to say a little bit about it?
Hello. Yeah. Well, I'm just hoping I can get everything sorted suitable to be up to Danny's standards, you know.
It shouldn't be hard, Eric. That really shouldn't.
Yeah, it's going to be a sort of a general thing about indoor scale, RC scale. I've been doing it for quite a few years, and you know, I want to do is I'm going to talk about sort of how it's developed from when I first started, and show some bits and pieces, and maybe a couple of little videos of what we get up to. There's quite a crowd of us who tend to do RC indoor scale in my club, and that we fly indoors. We don't fly aerobatic stuff at all. We're in my sessions, so it's sort of a lot of ready to fly models and also a lot of self-built models. So hopefully we can get something together and sort it out for you.
Okay, thanks very much, Eric. And
Graham, just a point. If Eric's doing November the 11th, can you let me know what changes you've made on the Zoom sessions, and I'll change the scale calendar.
As I've been working very long hours, John, so I actually have had it on my agenda for the last 2 nights and keep on forgetting. So yeah, I've got a few updates for you, so I'll definitely do that.
Fire them over and I'll put them up.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Okay. Good night, everyone. Thanks. And good morning, Ricky.